So the other day I had told you about how hackers had released the SDK for the Xbox One. And there's actually been quite a few stories that have come out of this as people read it and learn more. They've been posting things up, and I've got another new one for you today. But first, to recap real quick, and all these stories that I'm about to tell you, if you want to read more about it, as always, I'll leave links down below. But for instance, we learned that devs back in October just got access to a 7th core on the CPU where they can use up to 80% of that core for game development, and of course that's good. The Xbox One CPU was already overclocked, and now devs have another core that they can take advantage of for building games, and that's good for any CPU intensive games. If you have a lot of AI on screen, if you're dealing with a lot of physics or frames per second, CPU can help in those areas. We also learned that the GPU has tech built into it that allows low latency GPU to CPU exchange and has 8 graphics contexts. Now, there is a section of the SDK that is for 2015. It's like the 2015 roadmap, but that is so far locked away. Nobody's had access to that we know of so far, but there is a section in there that talks about a new multiplayer and party system set to launch in 2015. And this, at least in theory, would explain why the party system was such a mess, especially when the Xbox One first launched, and why some people are still having issues with parts of it. So at the beginning, you may remember how, you had to play like the same game just to be in a party with somebody. And a lot of that is how the system was set up to deal with games and parties and for everything to communicate with one another. And you know how even now matchmaking and invites don't always act like they should. Occasionally if you try to accept an invite and the game is full, you have to resend the invite. All this is based upon how the system is built right now. But in 2015, Microsoft is changing up how the matchmaking and party system works, and so it's supposed to be easier on developers. That way they can worry about actually developing their own features that they want to implement in the game or into the system. It's supposed to also allow a little bit easier handling of stats, like devs are supposed to be able to easily see now if they don't have their own way of seeing it, like things, for instance, people team killing or people quitting out. And then of course, if you can keep track of all that, then you can also of course punish people who do things like that. Now, they do say eventually the 2014 model is going to go away, so everybody's going to be on this new model here shortly. Now, the actual explanation of it is pretty technical, so I'll just leave that again down in the description box if you want to read exactly how the connections and algorithms are going to work. But they also mentioned in the SDK talking about smart matching. And remember, we talked about smart matching a long time ago, and that's supposed to be a way for you to be matched up with people using different criteria like skill or whatever else, and not just randomly connected to one another. Now, the way this reads, it acts as if the smart matchmaking system hasn't been fully implemented yet either, so that's also coming in 2015. Now, there is a theory floating around that Halo, the Master Chief Collection, may have been one of the first games to release that is using this new matchmaking and party system. And that would explain why the game has suffered so much since its launch and why it took so long to work out all the kinks, because they're actually working on a brand new system that possibly could have worked well in a testing environment but failed once they rolled it out to the main platform. And users were pointing out how whenever the game first launched, how the matchmaking system, worked, or I guess didn't work, but how there were certain things that were happening on the menu screen that it was almost as if, the game wasn't talking to the servers right, or something wasn't hooked up, obviously, the way that it should. And it may have been a little bit more than just game coding from 343. A lot of people say, look, maybe it's Microsoft that deserves most of this blame instead of 343. Maybe Microsoft was the one that pushed this system that wasn't ready yet or didn't end up being ready yet, and then they ended up doing it on one of their biggest launch games of the year. But I do want to make clear, this is just a theory based on nothing but pure speculation at this point. The actual multiplayer and party system changes are not speculation. That info is actually in the leaked documents. But linking it to Halo is pure speculation. But may not be such a far-fetched idea considering how many problems have surrounded the multiplayer and party system. You would at least try to hope for some sort of reasonable explanation as to why it was released in such a broken form. But even if this was true, and even if Microsoft was mostly to blame for this, you can't let 343 completely go, because there were a number of bugs that weren't online, so I don't think they should escape blame entirely. The good news is, for those who have been unsatisfied with multiplayer and the party system and the way it works, hopefully good changes are on the way. And if they did do a test early on with Halo, then hopefully they got all the data they need to get those kinks worked out, so whenever the system does roll out to every game, it will be a smooth transfer. Post below, do you think Halo Master Chief Collection may be using a new system? And are you glad to hear that Microsoft has a new party and matchmaking system coming soon? So if you want to know more, stay tuned right here to this channel and to VGN, and follow my Twitter for breaking news. That does it for me, the Red Dragon. I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.